Hey, David
and Karen
at Presence Videography. These are our top 10 lake kayaking trips in Washington. In 10th place on our list is Lake Tapps. Located a 30-minute drive east of Tacoma, Lake Tapps is a beautiful kayaking destination. It's also just 31 miles from Mount Rainier, and you can get spectacular views on a clear day of this iconic snow-capped volcano, which looms massive over the horizon at over 14,000 feet high. I launched at the North Lake Tapps County Park, paddling southeast under the Island Parkway East Bridge, then southwest to my rest point at a nice little island park, and I finished the spectacular day trip with a paddle north back to the launch point for pullout. I did this trip on a clear sunny afternoon in mid-July, and I recommend this trip when you can get a clear view of Mount Rainier. I loved the little island park rest point. It had a great little sandy beach to pull out, and nice trees, and a bench at the south end of the island where you can get a great view south. There were some beautiful lakefront houses along this trip. I recommend this trip for all levels of paddlers. Check winds. We like to paddle in less than 5 knots. I recommend caution with winds above 10 knots. Overall, I loved this trip because of the close proximity to the Seattle-Tacoma Olympia area, beautiful views of Mount Rainier, and nice parks and islands to stop at. Launch and pull out was easy, right off the beach next to the parking area, and parking is free. There are also several more launch points and paddle routes around Lake Tapps, which I talk about in the full video. I'll put a link below to the full-length video of my Lake Tapps kayaking trip. In 9th place on our list is Beaver Lake in Sammamish. It's located just a 30-minute drive east of Seattle. I put in at the boat launch, paddled north to the North Lake, which is the head of the Beaver, and then south to the Lodge and the South Lake, also known as Long Lake, which is the tail of the Beaver. This lake is great to paddle any time of year, and we've done multiple trips across all seasons. It's quite sheltered from the wind, so suitable in a wide range of weather conditions. There's lots of bird life and water life to be seen around the lake, in all seasons, but especially in spring and summer. The connectors between the main lake and the North and South Lakes are quite hidden, and it's fun to explore and find them, and paddle through to the connected lakes. We'd recommend this trip for all levels of kayakers, from beginner to advanced.
I love the quiet, that there were no motorboats, lots of water lilies, and viewing all the nice waterfront houses.
There's limited parking at the boat launch, and bring your Discover Pass. As an alternative, you can also park at the lodge and use your kayak cart to get down to the main beach. There's multiple full videos of our various trips to this great kayaking destination. You can find the links below. Our 8th favorite lake kayaking trip in Washington is the north end of Lake Sammamish. Located just a 30-minute drive east of Seattle, the north end of Lake Sammamish is great for kayaking, with lots of wildlife and multiple points to put in, take a rest stop, or pull out. Our favorite route here is to put in at Idlewood Park, paddle up the Sammamish River, then across to Sammamish Landing for a rest stop, and finally back to Idlewood Park to pull out. This route is great any time of the year, but our favorite seasons to paddle here are spring and summer, when there's lots of wildlife to see. Idlewood Park has a beautiful sandy beach to launch and pull out, and parking is free, but you'll want to bring your kayak cart since the parking lot is about 900 feet from the beach. This location is quite sheltered from the wind, and you're mostly paddling along the shore. Just watch out for winds from the south or winds greater than 10 knots. We'd recommend this trip for all levels of kayaker, from beginner to advanced. Beginners may want to head back along the shore of Marymoor Park rather than cut across from Sammamish Landing to Idlewood Park.
I loved the abundant bird life in this area along the Sammamish River. We saw bald eagles, herons, Canada geese, along with otters, turtles, and a beaver lodge.
We've done several fantastic kayaking trips at the north end of Lake Sammamish. Check out the links for the full videos below. Our 7th favorite lake kayaking trip in Washington State is Mayfield Lake. Located a 55-minute drive southeast of Olympia, or 37 minutes from Centralia, This is a truly beautiful lake and gorge kayaking experience as we paddled from Mayfield Lake up the Tilton River Gorge. We put in at the Mayfield Lake boat launch, paddled north past the Kachess State Park and up the Tilton River Gorge to our rest stop on the sandbars at the inflow of the Tilton River. Then back south around a couple of islands in the lake, stopping at a tiny island called Wildflower Island. We did our trip in May, and it was a great time to go, as there were beautiful wildflowers on the sides of the gorge, and there were multiple waterfalls that had good flow from spring runoff. It was fun having a picnic lunch on the sandbars at the inflow of the Tilton River. It was also fun to explore the islands and stop at Wildflower Island for a rest and a swim. This location is quite sheltered from the wind, and most of the time we were paddling at the north end of the lake close to the shore, and through a narrow gorge with steep sides for most of the way.
We saw a fair number of power boats here, but we could get up close with our kayaks to the little waterfalls and plants hanging from the cliffs. There was a really nice rest stop at the mouth of the river that was very peaceful and remote that we could only reach by kayak.
We'd recommend this trip for all levels of kayakers, beginner to advanced, and rentals are available at the Mayfield Lake Resort and Marina at the south end of the lake. Overnight camping is available at the Kachess State Park. Check out our full-length video of our Mayfield Lake kayaking trip at the link below. In sixth place on our favorite lake kayaking trips list is Beaver Lake. Located in the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest, just over an hour's drive southeast of Bellingham. Beaver Lake is a stunning kayaking location, with the snow-capped peaks of Mount Baker and Mount Shooksand looming high above, and has the iconic blue-green or turquoise color from being fed by meltwater from glaciers. We launched at the Horseshoe Cove campground, paddled north around the inlet, and east across to Anderson Point. Our trip was a relaxing half-day trip, with swimming and sightseeing, for a total distance of 2.1 miles or 3.3 kilometers. And you could extend the trip north or south if you wanted to go longer. We did our trip in early August, and this trip is highly recommended for whenever you can get a clear view of Mount Baker and Mount Shooksand.
This lake has a stunning teal watercolor with nice access to Anderson Point, which has hike-in campsites with gorgeous views of Mount Baker and Mount Shooksand.
The boat launch at Horseshoe Cove was convenient to launch and pull out for this trip. Overnight camping is available at both Horseshoe Cove Campground and Bayview North and South campgrounds just across the inlet. It was fun to explore the inlet and the islands around this trip. Most of this trip is sheltered paddling along the shoreline and suitable for all levels of kayakers. We recommend check winds and be careful of anything above 5 knots, especially if the wind direction is from the north or south along Beaver Lake. Check out the full-length video of our Beaver Lake kayaking and camping trip. We'll put a link below. In sixth place on our favorite lake kayaking trips list is Mountain Lake. Located on Orcas Island in the San Juan Islands, Mountain Lake is a beautiful, serene lake kayaking destination. In the middle of the pristine forests of Moran State Park, right next to Mount Constitution, which is the highest peak in the San Juan Islands, Mountain Lake has beautiful shoreline all around and 3 islands to explore. We did our trip near the end of July, but this is one you could do any time of the year, as it's quite sheltered from wind, being nestled in a saddle on Orcas Island.
I loved the peaceful setting of this lake. There were lots of dragonflies darting around our kayaks, and beautiful forest scenery bordering the entire lake.
This lake also had some of the most interesting plants, like this carnivorous spoonleaf sundew plant we found on one of the floating logs. The north side of the North Island had a great place to pull out, have a picnic and a swim. We camped nearby at Moran State Park, which we highly recommend. It's one of the best campgrounds we've been to in Washington State. There are multiple developed campgrounds on Kaskas Lake and one primitive campground on Mountain Lake. Check out the videos of our Mountain Lake kayak adventures at the links below. We have both quick highlights formats and the long-form peaceful relaxing format with minimal edits. Number 4 on our favorites list is Kachess Lake, another stunning mountain lake for kayaking. Located deep in the Cascade Mountains, just over an hour's drive east from Seattle. We launched at the north end of Kachess Campground and paddled the north section of the lake, also known as Little Kachess Lake. We passed an island, the Kachess River inflow at the north end of the lake, where we also camped, a beautiful raging waterfall, and steep cliffs on the east side. This trip is best in spring and early to midsummer. That's when the wildflowers are blooming, the river and waterfall have great flow, and the lake level is full with crystal clear water. In winter you can't get to the lake because of snow, and in fall the lake level is typically much lower since the lake is used for irrigation.
The crystal clear water was great to paddle in, with wildflowers clinging to the cliffs, sounds of the waterfall, loons calling in the morning, and watching the sunset on the surrounding mountains.
The best place to launch for this trip is the north ramp of the Kachess Campground. Parking is limited near the ramp, but there's overflow parking behind, and if you're camping, overnight parking is $10 per night. We loved the spectacular scenery, with the beautiful island and stunning snow-capped mountains surrounding the lake. The primitive campsite at the north end of the lake was perfect for our remote mountain lake camping adventure. We recommend this kayak trip for intermediate to advanced paddlers. This paddling location is remote, and the sides of the lake are steep, so there's not many places to exit the water. It's important to know your self-rescue too, and we recommend wearing a wetsuit or dry suit as the water comes from snowmelt and it's cold. There's no cell phone coverage in this location because of the high mountains all around, so we recommend a satellite communicator for emergencies. We've paddled this location many times, and it's better to paddle in general in the mornings when there's typically less wind. Check out the full-length videos of multiple world-class kayaking trips we've done at Kachess Lake. We've done both day trips and overnight camping trips at Kachess Lake. I'll include links to these videos below. In third place on our favorite lake kayaking trips in Washington State is Diablo Lake. It's a 2-hour drive east of Bellingham, within the North Cascades National Park, and Diablo Lake is within the Ross Lake National Recreation Area. We paddled right from our campsite on the water's edge, in the Colonial Creek South Campground. If you came for a day trip, you could also launch from the nearby ramp. We paddled first south to the mouth of the Thunder Creek inflow to Diablo Lake, then north to the Thunderhead Campground for a rest, before paddling around several islands to our lunch picnic stop on the tiny island at the east end of the lake, near the dam, where we also had a swim and took in some sunshine.
I really loved the distinctive teal glacial water of Diablo, which has islands for rest stops and swims, campsites to explore, all surrounded by stunning mountain scenery.
It can get windy on Diablo Lake. We recommend paddling earlier in the day and where wind forecasts are preferably less than 5 knots, but definitely less than 10 knots. My favorite things on this trip were the stunning high mountains all around, the glacier-fed turquoise water, and the many islands and interesting campsites and places to stop and explore. We'd recommend this trip for all levels of kayakers. Beginners may want to stay closer to the launch area where there's also more shelter. Make sure you have the right safety gear and self-rescue skills if you paddle this route. The water being glacier-fed can be really cold. Check out the full-length video of our Diablo Lake kayaking and camping trip at the link below. Number 2 on our top 10 kayaking destinations in Washington State is Banks Lake and Steamboat Rock. Located in central Washington, a 4-hour drive east of Seattle, this is an incredible desert kayaking experience. We put in at the boat launch at Steamboat Rock State Park, paddled around the rock, and then northeast along the shoreline, past beautiful beaches, oases, and islands joined by sand spits. We did our trip in late July, and it was perfect for enjoying swimming in the cool, clear water and the beautiful desert landscape all around. Other things we loved about this trip include
a surprisingly sandy bottom that we could see through the clear water, and beautiful scenery of Steamboat Rock with a nice number of rest and swim stops.
There was lots of bird life around the lake too, and we didn't fish, but I'm told the fishing is great in Banks Lake. We parked and launched at the Steamboat Rock State Park, so parking was covered by our Discover Pass, or you can pay the daily rate if you don't have one. This trip is great for all levels of paddlers, from beginner to advanced. Beginners may want to stay closer to the boat launch where it's more sheltered. Check winds before you go. We like to paddle in less than 5 knots, and use caution if you expect winds to be greater than 10 knots. Overnight camping is available at the Steamboat Rock State Park campground, and we also saw several primitive campsites scattered around the shore of Banks Lake. We finished off our trip at the cafe at Steamboat Rock State Park, which makes the best espresso milkshake we've had. Check out our full-length video of this amazing kayaking trip. I'll include a link below. First place on our top 10 kayaking trips in Washington State goes to Deep Lake. Located in central Washington State, just over 3 hours drive east of Seattle. In our half-day trip, we launched at the boat ramp on the west end of the lake, paddled along the south side to the head of the lake, and then back on the north side to where we stopped for a picnic lunch and swim, before paddling back to the ramp for pullout.
This lake had a beautiful teal color with cliffs towering above where we observed bird mud nests clinging to the rock, and all of it surrounded by stunning rocky cliff scenery.
We did our trip in mid-July on a stunning sunny day, and temperatures ranged from 60 to 80 Fahrenheit, and low humidity and very light winds. At this location, winds are generally lighter earlier in the day and can get strong in the afternoons and evenings. I love the clarity of the water and beautiful unique desert scenery all around. This was a beautiful area for a swim to cool off. We loved seeing the wildlife around the lake. The boat launch was great, and this is part of the Sun Lake State Park, so bring your Discover Pass. We recommend this trip for all levels of paddlers from beginner to advanced, and beginners may want to hang out closer to the boat launch. Sun Lake State Park Campground is a great place to camp nearby. Check out our full-length Deep Lake Kayaking in the Desert video. We also released this in a first-person, peaceful, relaxing format with minimal edits. I'll include links below. We hope you liked our top 10. It was really hard to decide on just 10. We've done so many amazing lake kayaking trips in Washington State. So we created a playlist of all of our lake kayaking trips in Washington State, and I'll put a link below if you want to check that out. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, we'd love your support if you want to give us a thumbs up, and we're doing new adventures all the time. So if you want to be notified as we release new videos, subscribe. And leave comments below if you have questions on these trips, or you have updates on the locations, or you have other favorites you want to share. Feel free to leave those in the comments. With that, happy kayaking, and be safe out there, and bye for now.